Hello everybody, in today's video we're going to be going over the 2021 severe weather season and especially the tornado season and kind of giving you a recap of what happened. We're going to be discussing why this season was a lot less active than last season where we set almost a mini record. We were fairly above the normal last year. This year we're actually quite below the average, or we're actually just near the average. So we're just going to be talking about what happened, what we could expect in the near future, and going over some of the statistics from this past severe weather season. Taking a look at the current National Weather Service page, you can see that we have some red flag warnings in effect for a good majority of the Northwest. That's where we have some fire danger that could occur in those areas, excessive heat warnings in parts of Wyoming and Montana, as well as some air quality alerts scattered throughout parts of the Northwest, with some more, I believe, air quality alerts in effect for parts of the Northeast as well. And then we have some dense fog advisories in parts of Minnesota and North Dakota. We have a few flood watches in parts of Alabama, Tennessee, Georgia, and South Carolina as well. Yesterday, we had a high temperature of 117 degrees in Death Valley, California, and we had a low temperature tied between 21 miles west-northwest of Big Piney, Wyoming. They got down to 36 degrees. So did Peterson, Utah. They got down to 36 degrees as well. The highest rainfall report was in Jackson, Tennessee, where they got 3.88 inches of rain, and there were no snowfall reports as of yesterday. So this is a map of the confirmed tornadoes that we've seen so far in the 2021 season, and also kind of printing out what rating they were on the EF scale. So you can see that the majority of those EF1 plus tornadoes were of course centered in through the southeast and into the southern plains. We did see a couple of days where we had one or two or multiple EF2 or EF3 tornadoes. We had 174 confirmed EF1 tornadoes, 37 EF2 tornadoes, 9 EF3 tornadoes, and just one EF4 tornadoes, no EF5 tornadoes. This was as of July 13th, so we did see a few more since then. So right now, as of when I'm recording, it's July 20th, so this is about a week old, but still fairly close to what we currently have in terms of the tornado map. Again, the majority of these were taking place in through the southeast, but something that really kind of surprised me was that you see that these do kind of get scattered out a little bit more into parts of the central plains, into the Great Lakes, and also into parts of the northeast where we saw a few tornadoes. So this year we really didn't see all that much in the southeast, but it was kind of more just spread out all over the eastern half of the country. We also didn't see as big of a severe weather season for, I believe, probably the second year in a row, where we didn't see too much severe weather in the central plains, which is the typical tornado alley. Over the past few years, we've seen that tornado alley area kind of shift from the central plains in areas like Oklahoma, Kansas, and Nebraska, and it's now moving closer to areas like Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, Arkansas, and Tennessee. Some of these areas in the southeast where you're getting more of these tornadoes to be centered. This is the second year in a row where we've seen most of the tornadoes being centered further in the southeast instead of in that central plains area. So that's just a little bit of a shift that we've seen over the past couple of years. But as a general note, this is a fairly sparsely populated map in terms of the amount of tornadoes. We haven't seen that many so far this year, at least compared to what we would normally see. Most of these are EF0 or EF1 tornadoes, and in total, we've only seen about 47 EF2 plus tornadoes, and we've only seen 10 EF3 plus tornadoes this year, which is actually fairly good in terms of that we haven't seen a lot. So we have seen a fairly inactive tornado season, which definitely I'm not complaining about, since tornadoes, of course, can cause some big damage. But it is interesting how we really haven't seen that many tornadoes just yet this year. Taking a look at last year, just to kind of give you an idea of what we are typically used to, this was last year's map. So you can see how we had a lot more, especially back through the southeast. We had a ton more in this area, and we also had a lot more, especially in areas in the northern plains, where we saw a ton in northern Illinois, a bunch in Minnesota, scattered throughout parts of Iowa and Wisconsin as well. That helped to bring up the numbers. And we also saw, and this may still happen since we are still in hurricane season, we saw, of course, with Hurricane Isaias and a couple other of those East Coast hurricanes and tropical storms, they brought in some tornadoes along the East Coast. This could still happen. I think this is one of the areas where we could get a few more tornadoes, just because the hurricane season is definitely not over. We're only in the middle of July. We're about halfway through the year. And of course, we still have the other half of the year, but we all know that as you get into especially October, November, December, you're really at the tail end of the tornado season. Usually, the main months would be from March through about May or June. Then it starts to kind of tail off a little bit. But a few tropical related tornadoes are still in the play here over the next couple of months. And of course, you saw that the Central Plains, they were a little bit more active than what we saw this year. Now, this is taking into account the entire last year. So this is taking from January 1st through December 31st. Of course, we're still only at July 20th, although most of the tornado season is still over. It's not completely over. You will still see almost another quarter or another third of your tornadoes still come in. So whether we see a more active later part of the tornado season or not, we're going to talk about that a little bit later on. I think it'll probably be on the less active side of things. And just to give you an idea, here's from January 1st through July 17th, and you can see how it's been a lot less active. You still see a few clusters of storms, especially in areas like Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, and Michigan up in the northern plains, but definitely not as active as what we saw last year. And you're also looking at, in parts of the southeast, not as many of those red dots indicating tornadoes. So again, that is something that we want to watch out for. Hopefully this trend continues, because it has been definitely nice to be without too many major huge tornadoes. We haven't heard of any of these big tornadoes recently, which is definitely good news. So we're going to hope that this trend does continue over the next few months. Taking a look at the severe weather reports from 2020, and this is from last year, so we would be right around here as of right now. So this is where our year would be. This is where our year currently is. So we're in the middle of July right now. And you can see that even before this mark, last year is still outpacing us by quite a bit. We had a bunch of tornadoes in through April, especially where we saw that Easter outbreak, unfortunately. And then we saw in May and June, we had a bunch of tornadoes as well. Not as many of those huge 100 plus tornado days, but we did see a few of those here and there. On the top is the total severe weather reports, and on the bottom is the tornado reports. So you can see, of course, we had that big spike in April where we saw a ton of tornadoes, and then kind of just a few tornadoes each day from May through July. And then you can see September, October, November, December, maybe a handful of tornadoes through the entire month, but not too many. For the entirety of 2020, we saw between 1,050 and 1,058, depending on which reports you look at, in terms of the total amount of tornadoes. No EF5 tornadoes, 6 EF4s, 18 EF3s, 89 EF2s, 408 EF1s, 416 EF0s, and 113 that are still unconfirmed, and they still are doing their data and research on which EF rating they're actually going to give those tornadoes. So looking at currently in 2021, you can see how we're kind of trailing behind here. We did see a fairly active May and June. It is a little bit less active, especially through this middle part of July. You can see how we started off the month fairly good in terms of the amount of tornadoes, but over the past week especially, we've been going kind of a little bit down. We've had a much more quiet pattern, but of course, I think these probably over the next month or so, they're going to fluctuate up and down. That was the total severe weather report reports, if we look at the actual tornado reports, you can see how each month you have 1 or 2 days that kind of stand out. June was a really low month in terms of the amount of tornadoes. March and April, that's where we kind of got most of our severe weather, mid to late March and into early April. And then May, we kind of bounced back. We saw a bunch more tornadoes, and then we didn't see too many tornadoes after that for July. But of course, we still have a ways to go in terms of our tornadoes. We're currently at 523 total confirmed tornadoes, and this chart goes from the 17th. So this is 3 days old of a chart, but of course, not a lot has changed since then. Taking a look at the map of the average tornadoes per season, and then kind of displaying that onto what we saw last year. This black line is what we saw last year, so you can see how we started off fairly above average. We were near the 75th percentile. We jumped up in April when we saw that tornado outbreak, so we saw a ton of storms in April, and then we just kind of plateaued the rest of the season, and we ended up actually being near and actually below what is normal for that year. So we were actually on a below average season as a whole. If we kept up our trajectory, we would definitely hit close to the record, which is that red line right there. But we had that one active month in April, and then it kind of just plateaued. The minimum, of course, was back a few years ago. We had 944 tornadoes in that pink line right here. So this is the bottom, and this is the lowest that we've ever seen. And then for the entire season, 944 through December 30th, and then the maximum here is 1,884 tornadoes, and that was that was definitely a few years ago. That was back I believe in the 1900s. So that was a while ago when we saw that many tornadoes. So we had a ton of tornadoes back then. That's the red line. That's showing you the maximum, the minimum in that pink line, and then you can see where we were last year in that black line. I think we're probably going to end up a little bit below last year. So we're probably going to be somewhere within this range right here, in between last year and the lowest ever, just based on what we're currently seeing. We're not really too impressive in the amount of tornadoes that we've seen so far. If you're wondering why this is, it's definitely not because of a lack of rainfall or a ultra dry pattern or anything like that. We've actually been above average in terms of rainfall, right around 125 to even 175% of normal, so closer to 25 to 75% above normal in these areas. So this entire area over the southeast, the southern plains, where you typically see the majority of your tornadoes and severe weather, these areas have all been in the green in terms of more precipitation compared to normal. I think one of the main reasons is actually because of the temperature pattern that we have in place. So just taking a look at the forecasted upper air map for later this week. This would be for tomorrow, the forecasted upper air map. You can see that we have a trough into the eastern United States. This is going to prevent much of your severe weather from developing. What you would want is to have some sort of a ridge over the southeast, and you would be able to get afternoon thunder showers, or you would just want kind of a bit of a colder air mass to the north. You would want this troughing to actually be up here, so you would want this troughing to kind of move over to the west a little bit, and you would want this heat to be further to the south. That would create a bigger temperature difference, and that's how you can mainly get most of these severe weather events to actually form. If we look at the forecasted high temperatures for Friday, and you could pick any week from this week, next week, the week after, really nothing changes, but you can see how over this entire area, we can pick the southernmost spot of Texas, and you're gonna have comparable temperatures to the northernmost spot of Montana. So this is a few thousand miles, and there's basically a 0-degree temperature difference within these areas, and that's one of the reasons that we're seeing this big, this lackluster tornado season, because we have seen most of your temperatures being up in the 90s in parts of the northern plains, and they've actually been a little bit cooler than normal in parts of the southeast. And because of that, when you have warmer in the north and colder in the south, they're actually going to even out. And what you would want is to have an inverse of that. You would want the opposite. You would want to have warmer in the south, colder in the north, so that you could have temperatures that would be, let's say, 70 degrees in parts of the northern plains and closer to 90 or 95 degrees in the southeast. that creates a bigger temperature difference, and you can get storms to form along that temperature differential line. The fact that we don't have that, I think, is one of the main reasons that we haven't seen too many tornadoes or severe weather events in general in these areas. And if you're looking at this, you can tell where these severe weather events will probably set up. It's probably going to be along this area right here. And that's where we've seen most of our severe weather recently. It's been up in the Northeast and the Great Lakes, where we saw our most recent batch of severe weather. And that's because they have a big temperature differential within the area. You have 70s to the north and 90s not too far to the south. So when you get that big difference right there, that's how you can get some of your storms to actually develop. So that's why that's happening, in my opinion. That's what, based on everything I've seen, that's one of the main explanations I can see for why that's happening. And if you're thinking I'm just cherry picking one or two days out of the week, here's the entire month on average for the average high temperature. You can see how down in the southeast we're into the 90s, and then you go up into areas in the Great Lakes and you're into the low 80s. So 10-degree temperature differential over maybe 1,000 miles is definitely not going to cut it in terms of what's needed for severe weather. You're going to want that temperature differential to maybe be a little bit higher. You'll want temperatures in the southeast to maybe be near 95 on average, and temperatures up in the Great Lakes to maybe be 1 or 2 degrees cooler than that. So we'll have to see. It does look like mainly this stagnant temperature pattern where we're above normal in the north, colder in the south, again equaling it out from what is typical. I think that is one of the things that's holding back this tornado season. So luckily we have seen a much more quiet tornado and severe weather season than normal. These events can definitely cause a lot of damage. You've seen last year what they could do on that Easter outbreak, where we saw a ton of storms, unfortunately, and a few more of those big outbreaks last year. You can see what they definitely can do to community, and they can definitely tear apart homes and houses, unfortunately. So again, we don't want any tornadoes. I definitely don't want any tornadoes, and I'm actually enjoying this more quiet pattern. It's much more nice outside, especially where you're in kind of cooler temperatures. For a lot of these areas, moderate temperatures. So on the whole, I'm actually enjoying this summer temperature pattern, just because it is a little bit more laid back and there aren't as many storms here and there. So that's definitely good news. It looks like that will probably continue. Tell me down below if you have seen any severe weather, or if you have any severe weather events that you can recall from this year. Again, this has been a more inactive year compared to normal, but we'll have to see how that does pan out over the next few years, and the next few months especially. So that is going to wrap it up over the next for today's video. Please consider liking the video, subscribing, and turning on notifications, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.